Hey guys, Brendan Bradford here from Sporting News. We're talking all things Bledisloe Cup, and I'm absolutely stoked to be joined by Wallabies legend David Campese. It was a 16-all draw, one of the sort of more exhilarating and fascinating ends to a Test match that I can remember in recent memory. What did you make of the game? And half a week on, what do you make of it?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan, for having me on the show. Look, it was quite interesting, wasn't it? I think that there's a lot of people quite shocked. A lot of people think, oh, this is going to be one-way traffic, especially after we saw the North-South game a couple of weeks ago. But obviously the Wallabies, there's a lot of young guys there who have played the All Blacks in junior schools and 20s and have beaten the All Blacks. So to them, it's just like going out there and playing another game. Over the many years, even when I was playing, there's a lot of people have come in and had this awe about the All Blacks. And I think we saw in the weekends something very different from the way they were playing. Yes, they had some really good things, the All Blacks. But the thing that changed me was the attitude of Ione, who scored that try, which wasn't a try. That's the first time I've ever seen an All Black try to be smart, if you know what I mean. He did the big dive and all that. Yeah. And I said to my son, Jason, I said, he hasn't scored that, you can see. And when they went back, I think the Wallabies looked at that and gone, okay, here's an opportunity now. And they took that opportunity. Instead of being 17-3 at half time, there was 8-3. So, it could have been very, very different. But I think the resilience by the Wallabies and, to go on for 87 minutes as well, but also not go for a drop goal from either team, or you're right in front of the post, right in front. Obviously, it was not on anyone's mind. But, yeah, look, I think it's exciting times to come.
For me, the Rieko Ioane no try, it was very similar to Jeff Wilson's dive with George Gregan coming across at the football stadium about 20 years ago.
1994, I was there. Yes, I remember that
one. And yeah, you mentioned, I've obviously seen your comments in the New Zealand press this week that the All Blacks may have lost their aura. Where do you sort of think that comes from? Is it just something that's just happened now with this Wallabies side coming in, or has it been coming over the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, I think, as I said, it's been a very difficult year. And year in, year out, the Kiwi teams play the Wallabies in the championship or the Super Rugby, so they can gauge where they are. But this year it's been very difficult. They haven't gauged. So we've played against our own teams, and New Zealand played against their teams. I just think it's a combination of a lot of things. They've lost a lot of good players. Kieran Reid's gone, who's a great leader, very, very powerful, great player. And when you change the team in a certain way, it does affect you. And I think that Kane's not the same. He's not the leader like Kieran Reid or Richie McCaw. There's a book called Legacy, and it's the history of the All Blacks. And basically, I know I shouldn't swear, but it says in the book, if you're a dickhead, you don't play for the All Blacks.
Yeah.
And on the weekend, I'm not saying he's one of those, but the way he went about is like, look at me, look at me. The All Blacks don't normally do that. So they've got a new coach under Foster. Foster's got a 2-year contract, which is very rare these days because most teams in between World Cups give a 4-year contract. So unless you're really bad. So I think there's a lot of pressure under Foster as well. You had Robinson, who's been very, very successful with the Crusaders over the last couple of years. You had Jamie Joseph from Japan, Dave Rennie. Those two didn't apply for the job. Robinson went for the job and they said no. So I think there was a lot of rumblings with the supporters in New Zealand as well, which we don't really hear of. But on the weekend, I think you could sense that there was something happening. And the Wallabies just went out there and played the game.
Do you think there's something in, Foster's sort of that a little bit more old school, whereas guys like Dave Rennie, Scott Robinson down at the Crusaders, they're bringing sort of a new sort of look. They're not actually younger, but they're not as old school, which Ian Foster is.
Well, it's quite interesting you're saying about what's old school and what's new school. Rugby's the same. Rugby hasn't changed. I'm old school, but I still watch the game and I can still read a game, even though I'm old school. There's been so much structure in the game now. And the structure is for these young kids, what they see is they can only make up one way of playing the game because that's all they know. You know, if you watch the game of rugby now, and if I sat down with you, you said their ruck's over one side of the field, all the players are watching the ruck. When I was playing on the left wing, it's no good me watching the ruck because I've got nothing to do with the ruck. I'll be watching in front of me to see where my player was. So that's all changed now because there's a lot of communication in the old days, and now there's not as much as communication. So if I wanted the ball off you in a game, I would call my ball and you would pass. But now what's happened is you've got the ball, you're going to pass it when you want to pass, not when I want the ball. So that's how it's all changed a bit. So, yeah, you know, coaches are the same. Coaches are there. Foster's been there a long time. He's been under Hansen. But again, you know, is he the right coach? And on the weekend, yes, it was the first game of the year. We got another one at the Bledisloe at Eden Park, and I was one of the last players to win there in 1986. Definitely old school. But, you know, there's going to be a lot of pressure on New Zealand now. But, yes, they'll get better. And we've just got to just get out there and just believe that we can do it. And I think last week they've got a bit of belief, especially in New Zealand.
What is it about Eden Park? Obviously, yeah, you said you scored a try in that. I think in that last game that the Wallabies won there. What changed? What happened? Why has not just the Wallabies, but why hasn't anyone won there in such a long time?
Well, I think if you look back at history, 1987, the All Blacks won the World Cup there. New Zealand, that was the first Rugby World Cup. You go to South Africa in 1995, they won the World Cup at Ellis Park. So it's very, very difficult. So when South Africa want to play a game against the All Blacks and they want to win, they go back to Ellis Park because there's something about the Oval. England's Twickenham, you know, that's how it sort of pans out. And I think it's just one of those, this is our ground. This is it. This is where we won the World Cup. We're not going to lose on this ground. So there is something about the ground. There's something about the history. And I think last year after the Wallabies won in Perth by a massive score, then the week after they get absolutely slaughtered on the Ellis Park. It's just one of those things you've just got to come over. It's a rugby oval, but it's a lot of tradition, a lot of history left of that oval. So I think that's to them, to New Zealand, it's a lot of things, but to us, it's about just trying to get a victory there.
I think you touched on it just there. There's been a lot of instances certainly over the last sort of 5 to 7 years where maybe the Wallabies will beat the All Blacks, say in Sydney or in Perth last year, and then go to Eden Park and not just lose, but you know, get fairly walloped. Yeah. So I think that's sort of one of the things leading into this Sunday. But you know, you also sort of mentioned that a lot of these guys are coming through that beaten New Zealand in schoolboys or age group. Do you think maybe that sort of scar tissue maybe isn't there for some of these young Wallabies guys? Yeah, well, I go back, you know, I look at myself. I mean, I come back from a rugby league background. So in 1982, we played the All Blacks under-21s at the Sydney Cricket Ground before the Wallaby Scotland Test. You had Grant Fox, you had the Wetton brothers, you had all these big players playing. We flogged them, absolutely flogged them. Probably the biggest score ever that the under-21s are lost by. So we had a nucleus of those team players went on to play the All Blacks. So because we beat them there, it's just like, okay, well, we beat them there, we can beat them here. So, you know, and I think that's what these guys have done. You know, they've beaten the schoolboys and they've beaten the 20s, and they're saying, well, if we can beat them there, why can't we beat them up at the top level? Yes, it's a different sort of team. There's a lot of history up there, but that's what's happened now. These guys have lost a couple of games. And I think last year the Australian schoolboys beat the New Zealand schoolboys 24-0. So when you play teams like that and you win like that, you say, well, you know, we've done it there before. Why can't we do it now? So I think there's a lot of self-belief. And also you've got Dave Rennie, obviously, who's coached the All Black players. He knows a lot of the players as well. He knows their tricks, the way they play. And I think you could just see by the game, the Wallabies tried to do a backline movement from the back of a line out. The hookers passed the ball, went to ground, the All Blacks scored. The All Blacks tried exactly the same move in the second half and they scored. So you can see they're all playing from the same playbook. You know, so really you've got to try and find something a bit different now because all the coaches seem to know all the same tactics these days instead of actually going out there and guys just try to play what's, you know, there's a lot of talk about playing what's in front. What does that mean? It's really about trying to put the ball in the space, run into the gaps, and then look for players to pass the ball to. And do you think, you know, you sort of touched on back, well, I know we keep going to back in the day, but it's almost coming full circle in a way with Super Rugby Australia this year. whether that's sort of helped the guys in the Wallabies this year or not, I'm not sure. Maybe only time will tell. But do you think? Do you like that system? Would you rather go back to a Super Rugby or whatever format Super Rugby is going to take, whether it's just Trans-Tasman or however?
Yeah.
What would you prefer going forward?
I think the Trans-Tasman. I think Hamish McLennan's trying very hard to try and get, a Trans-Tasman. It worked for us because if you think about, I think it was last year, the year before. I think the Rebels flew from here to South Africa, played one game, went on to Argentina, and came back to Australia. I mean, firstly, the amount of money, the amount of travelling hours to play a couple of games. So if we go back to the Trans-Tasman tournament, we're playing the best team in the world week in, week out, obviously because they're players. We're going to benefit from that. By going to South Africa, I know the South African teams don't like coming down here because of the time zone. So they really should go to Europe. We have a lot of island teams here. We've got Japan around the corner and we've got a lot of New Zealand teams. That's where we became good because we were playing the Kiwis week in, week out.
Yeah.
And we're going to get better. The young guys are going to be exposed. And also, I think what should be really done is go back to the old tours. You go to New Zealand for a 3-test tour. It's 6 weeks. You play midweek games. You've got the young guys get exposed. At the moment, the young guy gets exposed now to play the All Blacks in a test match.
Yeah.
In the old days, you used to go on rugby tours. Go back to the tours. That's what people love. Then you can see the young guys coming through the system and they're going to learn and the coach can understand this is an experimental tour. We're going to bring a lot of young guys and off we go.
And I think attached to that as well is the last couple of years you have, say the Waratahs, they might not even play in certain New Zealand teams or, for a year or two. But, back in the day, again, if you had the likes of your Gregans and your Larkhams playing against Andrew Mertens and Justin Marshall a couple of times a year, maybe that stigma's not there either.
No, it's amazing you got back to the old school there, a couple of old players there. No, I agree. I think that's what we need. I think the Trans-Tasman Cup is the way to go.
Amazing. I know I've got to let you go. I've kept you too long, but appreciate your chat today and enjoy the football this weekend.
No, you too. I'm sure that we're going to go pretty close this weekend.